Hey, everybody. Welcome. So glad to be here tonight with all of you. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. It's going to be a great conversation that we have here tonight. I am so happy to be here with all of you to have a great conversation. It's going to be awesome. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's do it.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you. So glad to have the opportunity to engage with all of you here tonight on yet another one of our live streams. Now, this is going to be the last live stream in front of the bookshelf for a little while, week or so, because I'm headed to Missouri. I am headed to the great state of Missouri. I am headed to Missouri, the land my father's family is originally from. I am headed to old St. Louis. It'll be in that area that we have our great upcoming workshop. I'm very, very, very excited about it. Looks like it's pretty much set as it's going. I mean, I guess if you wanted to be part of it, if you really wanted to be part of it, you could sign up last minute, but it might be difficult. I don't know. You may have missed the boat, but I mean, there's still some spots, and we could probably fit you in if you still wanted to be there. But that is where I am going to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I am going to be at our workshop in Missouri. I am going to be in our workshop in Missouri. What is it? Is it Missouri, or Missouri? Missouri. How do they say it? Right? There's many different ways of saying it. I always just said Missouri, but I am going to be on the road now. It is up in the air. I may actually, and this is going to be wild, I may actually try to do a stream from the road. I don't know if I will be able to pull that off. If driving down the highway with my buddy Liam, shout out to you, Liam, Quantum Leap, Liam. We may, as we're driving down the highway, attempt some kind of driving down the highway stream, but I don't know. I do not know if we will be able to pull that off, if the phone service will be good enough, whatever. We're going to be on the road. We'll be on the road starting tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, my plan is this. I will wake up in the morning. I will record yet another episode of our amazing podcast with the great Harpal Brar and the great Jyoti Brar. We will do yet another amazing episode. Finally, they've been traveling and I've been traveling and all these things have been happening, but finally the stars have aligned that Jyoti Brar, Harpal Brar, and myself are all available at the same time. We're going to do another one of our great podcasts tomorrow morning, not live. We will be pre-recording it. And then after that, I will be hitting the road with Liam. And Liam and I will be hitting the road, and I will see you all in Missouri. And then I'll be back in New York. And then from there, after I'm back in New York, we'll continue to stream. But back in New York, we will then, at that point, be preparing for our excellent July 10th event. We're having a live CPI event July 10th in New York City. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be badass. It's going to be a great event. So July 10th, mark your calendar. Announcements to be made next week, not this week. Focused on the workshop for now. July 10th will be our NYC CPI live event. We haven't done a live event in person, or like indoors in a long time. Now, we had our little rally in May, and this will be a live event that we're doing July 10th. So if you're in the New York City area, we could use your help. Peter Coffin's coming to town. Looks like Jose Vega is going to be there. Some other speakers. The details of the event are coming shortly. We're holding off on those details for now. But very, very exciting. Very, very, very exciting. A lot of things to tell you all about tonight. Did you know that Happy Days is set in American socialism? Milwaukee's. All right, I'm going to write that down. That's a good point. I got plenty to say about that. So I've got plenty to say on that one. That's actually a very good question, but there we go. So yes. I'm really glad you like my streams. Glad you like it. So folks, the way this works generally, for those of you who may just be joining us now, not familiar with the format, is I give my opening remarks. As I give my opening remarks, you saw what I'm doing. I'm writing down your super chat questions. I'm typing them down furiously on the keyboard as I give them. Then from there, we do a roll call. We find out who it is that's on the other side of the camera, who's watching. And then the second half of our show is just me answering your super chat questions. So if there's something you would like me to talk with you all about in the second half of our program today, send me a super chat, just like Jeebus the Great just did. He sent me 2 of them. I got stuff to talk about already. Follow after Jeebus the Great, who just sent super chats. Send a super chat of your own. I will type it onto the list, and there we go. And then tomorrow morning, like I said, waking up early, doing the podcast with the Bras, the awesome communist family from Britain. And then from there, I'm headed out of state. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, it is not too late, I guess. There are still some spots at the weekend workshop. So if you want to be there, you can still join CPI on the website and then send an email that you really want to come to the workshop. And we will do our best to try and get you there. But it might be difficult at this point, but we got a good crew of people. So on the phone all day talking to different people about different projects, about July 10th and about the workshop. And, it is all about organization for me. It is all about building a network. And I've been hammering home this point recently on my streams. I've been hammering home about build a ship in the storm, build a ship before the storm comes, Noah's Ark. I've been talking about the crisis that's hanging over our heads. But tonight, I want to talk about it a little bit differently than I normally talk about it. I want to talk about it a little bit differently than I've talked about it before. Because as people saw a little frustrated with Eddie from Midwest Marx. I think he means well. I think he's a good guy, but got a little frustrated with him today. Hope I didn't completely burn the bridge, but he got under my skin a little bit. I saw what he was doing. Made me think, made me talk to a few people on the phone, and made me reflect on a few things. Had a good conversation. I had many good conversations today. I went to the gym to work out, and I finally got to work out, but I was on the phone with many people this afternoon, and trying to line everything up for July 10th and for this coming weekend. And I talked with a lot of people today, did a lot of thinking, was very mad at Eddie from Midwest Marx, though I think he means well. He just doesn't get it. Folks, wokeness is going down. Let me repeat this. Wokeness is going down. Wokeness is dead in the water. The ship is sinking. Wokeness is going down. Wokeness is going down. I'm not saying that to stir up the troops. Not saying that because I want it to go down. I won't mind. Not going to make me feel bad. Not going to cry a river for it. That's not the point. This is a fact. Wokeness is going down. People are tired of wokeness. It peaked. It had its moment in the George Floyd uprisings that swept the country during the pandemic, that paved the way for Biden to be elected president, for him to be elected president, as some people might put it. People are tired of wokeness. People are looking at the topless trans woman on the White House lawn. People are tired of wokeness. They're sick of it. They're sick of people trying to out pronoun each other. They're sick of the social media toxicity that comes from wokeness. They're sick of it. And you can see this. Even MSNBC is starting to kind of acknowledge this. They're sick of everyone being a fascist, everyone being a Nazi. People are sick of being told that they're bad, that they deserve to be poorer. People are sick of the call-out culture. People are sick of toxicity. People are tired of wokeness. Just a fact. If the election were held today, Donald Trump would win by a landslide. And Donald Trump's main rival among the Republicans, Ron DeSantis, has made anti-wokeism a huge part of his song and dance he's putting on. People are tired of wokeness. People are just tired of it. They're just sick and tired of it. But What comes after wokeness? What comes after wokeness? What comes next? Fair question, isn't it? What comes after wokeness? What comes next? The Biden administration is wildly unpopular. The population is weary of all of this. Biden may be reelected in 2024. There's a very good chance that Biden will be reelected in 2024. If Trump is out of the picture, can't run, the Democrats aren't forced to at least some degree have a primary, there's a very good chance Biden will be reelected. But the population is weary of wokeness. The population is tired of wokeness. And I'm going to tell you why wokeness is going to fail. I'll tell you why wokeness is going to fail. Folks, I've been warning you all about the economic foundations of society, the problem of overproduction, the tendency of the falling rate of profit. We're aware that the economic problems that are facing U.S. society in our time are going to continue. They're not going to go away. They're going to continue. We're aware of this. We're very aware of this. We're well aware of this reality. We're well aware of this reality. For some reason, the chat isn't coming through on StreamYard. So I see John McCarthy here. RFK just brought truth. More Americans than bitter Twitter. Yeah, I don't know why the chat is not working on StreamYard. I'm going to tell you why wokeism will fail. Why wokeism is doomed. Why wokeism has no future. I'll tell you why. You ready? I want you to imagine that the country is in the middle of a crisis. I want you to imagine that amid this crisis, food is becoming very hard to get your hands on. And I want you to imagine there's a lot of instability in the country. People are angry. People are fighting with each other. You know, electricity is going off in different parts of the country. Food is not being delivered in some areas. Things are not going well in the country. You're worried about whether or not your family will have enough food. You're worried about whether or not the electricity in your area is going to come off. Imagine we're in a serious situation as a country. Now imagine that under those circumstances, you got a knock at your door. Someone knocked on your door. You're worried about the country. You're worried about the electricity coming on. You're worried about being able to feed your kids. And someone knocked on your door some evening as you're worried about the security of your family. And you opened the door. It was a group of Native Americans with guns, with firearms. The Native Americans said to you, "Your house is on stolen land, buddy. Your ancestors stole this house from us. And now the country is coming apart. We're coming to take our land back. We want to take you out of your house and take your land. We want to kick you and your wife and kids out of the house with the economic conditions being as they are in this precarious circumstance. You guys have got an hour to get your stuff and get lost. We're enacting land back. Your house is on stolen land. Get out. Imagine that happened. Now, if that happened to you, under those circumstances, didn't happen to you tonight when the country is relatively stable, didn't happen to you 2 weeks from now, but it happened in a situation where the country is really, really unstable. And they've got guns. They're ready to enforce it. Now tell me, under those circumstances, if this hypothetical situation were to happen, even though you might intellectually agree, with those Native Americans, you might feel like, yes, my home is on stolen land. Yes, I am a privileged white person. You might intellectually agree with them. But when you look in the faces of your children and your family members there who are worried about how they're going to feed themselves, when you fear the situation in the country, when you know that not only getting kicked out of your house is going to leave you homeless, but you might not have food, there might not be running water, as much as you might intellectually agree with those Native Americans, as much as you might be aware about the massacre at Wounded Knee and the horrendous atrocities and the millions of Native Americans who were slaughtered by white settlers, as much as you might be well aware of the horrors of what's been done to indigenous people, you're going to tell those folks to get lost. You're going to tell those people to go the hell away. If you have a gun of your own, you are going to go and get it and be prepared to defend yourself. And that is why wokeness will fail. That is why wokeness will fail. When people are desperate, when people are struggling, when it becomes a kill or be killed situation, when people are afraid of their own survival, all the pronouns and all the white guilt and Hunger Games and all of that goes away. All of that goes away. When people are desperate, when people are up against it, all the performative land back, all of that stuff is going to slip right out of their hands. And they're going to say, no, this is my home. This is my family. I'm fighting for my wife. I'm fighting for my kids. Get lost. Get lost. And they're going to defend their home. I'm not saying that to say that people are inherently bad, and I'm not even saying that that's inherently good. What I'm saying is people respond to the realities of their life circumstances. And you can incentivize people for talking a certain way. You can reward people for talking a certain way. You can punish people for talking a certain way. But at the end of the day, when people are struggling, when people fear for their own safety and their own security, all of this stuff goes away. And the thing that makes Marxists historically strong, let me add, is that we are the ones who understand this. It is the Marxists historically who understood that the political consciousness of the people is a product of their material conditions. And that The struggle for socialism, the struggle against capitalism and imperialism comes from the workers banding together to move in their own economic interest against the capitalists and the employers. And this is something that the synthetic left has widely attacked. Genuine Marxists for believing it. They call it economic determinism. They call it economic determinism. And thank you, Alex Rickle, for your super chat. I am cutting and pasting it. I cannot, for some reason, StreamYard has stopped showing them. I can't show it on the screen, but I see it. Thank you, Alex Rickle, Landback. I see. Marxists historically understand that people are motivated by working in their own economic interest. That the working class will struggle against the employers to increase its living standards. The working class will band together to fight for jobs and healthcare and education. That the biggest cure for racism in American history is the picket line, bringing black and white workers together to see their common interests against the employer. This is our history as a movement. Wokeness repudiates and spits on all of that. And yes, Jamie, I can talk about that. I'm cutting and pasting it down. I can't show it on the screen because StreamYard is acting weird. Wokeness repudiates all of this. Wokeness repudiates this. I've told you all about the Communist Party, but it's worth revisiting. How did the Communist Party handle the race question during the 1930s? Two great examples. 1934, the dock workers of San Francisco went on strike, led by the Communist Party. It's not the first time the dock workers of San Francisco had gone on strike. They'd been on strike on many different occasions. However, what made this particular strike different was that usually when the dock workers of San Francisco went on strike, the bosses would hire the black people as scab labor. The unions of dock workers, of longshoremen, were whites only. They were racist. So when the longshoremen, the dock workers would go on strike, the bosses would then hire black people who would be happy to get a decent job like that, and they would work in place of the white workers, and the strike would be broken. But in 1934, the Communist Party organized the dock workers to go on strike, and before they did it, they sent black leaders of the Communist Party to every black church in San Francisco. And black leaders of the Communist Party said one of the demands of the upcoming dock workers' strike is that black people be hired to work on the docks. We are going to force the capitalist bosses to give us a hiring hall so we get to hire the workers, a hiring hall. And we are going to demand, we're going to make sure that black people get access to those union wages on the docks. And the Communist Party already had quite a reputation in the black community for opposing Jim Crow segregation, for standing in solidarity with people in Africa against the imperialists, etc. So in 1934, the summer of 1934, when the dock workers of San Francisco went on strike, the black community supported the strike and did not scab on the strike. Black churches organized support for the strike. Black community leaders supported the strike. And the dock workers of San Francisco won in 1934. And they won because they repudiated racism, because it was in their economic interest. It was in their economic interest to oppose racism. Racism is a tool of the capitalist bosses. And the communists got the white dock workers of San Francisco to understand that the only way they could win against their employers was to put the needs of the black people at the center of their strike. And by doing so, not only did they unionize the docks of San Francisco into a real union, the International Longshore Warehouse Union, the ILWU, but on top of that, they also integrated the docks of San Francisco. That's not wokeism. That's class struggle. That's getting people to understand that racism is the boss's tool to divide the workers, getting people to see their common interest. That was the Communist Party's tradition. 1937, the auto workers in Flint, Michigan went on strike. They occupied their factory, the Flint sit-down strike. There was only one black man who worked in the auto plant. He was a janitor. They wouldn't allow black people to work on the line in the factory, but they did allow one black man to be a janitor. And when they marched out of the plant victorious, it was that one black auto worker who carried the American flag. And that was a political statement, because the forces that had tried to drive the auto workers out of their plant that they had occupied, the Black Legion that murdered the father of Malcolm X, the Ku Klux Klan, these kinds of groups that had attacked the auto workers had been racist. Had said the labor unions were a Jewish communist conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. And so they understood that racism and union busting had the same source. And so they made an anti-racist statement when they were victorious in their strike in 1937, and the only black auto worker in the plant was the one who carried the American flag. These things are important to understand. I see your question there, Jamie. I'm cutting and pasting it down. Hold on. These things are important to understand. Wokeness, this academic invention, repudiates all of this. Wokeness ignores all of everything I'm telling you right now. Instead of having a narrative of the working class struggling against the capitalist class, it has a narrative about good people and bad people. The good people are the oppressed, and the bad people are those with privilege. And that narrative in and of itself is problematic, as they would say. A lot of times, people who are oppressed, people who are traumatized, people who had a horrendous upbringing, don't necessarily do good things. You know, the prisons of this country are full of people of many different races and nationalities, many of whom are very oppressed, economically speaking, in terms of life opportunities, etc. And yes, there's a number of them that are there for victimless crimes, like smoking weed, and they should be released immediately. But there's also a lot of them who are there because they've done very bad things. Now, they've done these very bad things because of a society that they grew up in, that, a society that produced them. But even though they are oppressed, they've still done very bad things. This society produces a lot of rapists and a lot of murderers. The society produces a lot of people who rob people of, such things exist. Just because people are oppressed doesn't make them good. Furthermore, there are a lot of people who come from privilege who do very good things. Che Guevara was from a very wealthy Argentine family, but he went out and sacrificed, gave his life to create the Cuban Revolution, to fight for peasants and workers around the world. But Che Guevara, according to the world, he's a bad person. He's a light-skinned person. Right? He was a privileged, wealthy person in South America. Alex Oliveira talks about Frederick Engels. So the woke narrative of good people versus bad people. The good people are the privileged, are the oppressed, and the bad people are the privileged ones. That narrative doesn't work either. Wokeism is deranged. It is completely and utterly deranged. And it's going down. And when the crisis hits in the United States, it's going down. And we do not have, at this point, a genuine mass Marxist movement that will be able to step up and lead the workers as the crisis intensifies. And the next stage of the deterioration of U.S. society is going to give birth to a wave of anti-wokeness. There's going to be a wave of anti-wokeness. There's going to be a wave of people standing in front of their house with their gun saying, "You're not taking my house. I don't care if it's on stolen land." And that's just how it's going to be. Like it or don't like it, that's how it's going to be. There's going to be a wave of people who will look at the woke people and they'll say, "Wow, look what you did." The woke people go around saying, "We hate America. We want to destroy America. This country is an evil, racist, white settler country." That's what the woke people go around saying. And when America starts to fall, starts to crack, people are going to look at the woke people and say, "You did this. This is what you guys wanted." And when the reality of what a collapse actually looks like strikes people, when it's not a fantasy, when it's not the purge, when the reality of what it's like to see a society start to really crumble, starts to hit people, their rage at the woke people is going to be massive. And there's going to be all kinds of different elements in the wave, the blowback to wokeism that we're going to see. And it's not going to look like conservatism in the United States has looked for a long time, because it'll have a very anti-establishment edge. There'll be a lot of conspiracy theories, as they call them, QAnon type stuff. There'll be a lot of religion, a lot of patriotism, but it'll be very anti-establishment, very anti-globalist, etc. But it looks like the ruling class of the United States is doing everything they can to make sure that this anti-wokeness, this wave of anti-wokeness that's coming and that will come as the crisis intensifies, can be utilized against China. They are going to try to use the blowback against wokeness against China. I'm already seeing it. Posts about how the Chinese Communist Party promoted free love and queer theory. That never happened. But they're already trying to say woke is like China. China equals woke. China is not woke. They don't have gay marriage in China. You know, a lot of patriotism in China. All the woke people hate China. They think it's fascist, Nazbol, whatever. But they are already trying to get people to believe wokeness and China are somehow the same. And they're going to try to transform the wave of anti-wokeness among the U.S. population into a wave of anti-Chinese sentiments. That's what they're going to try to do. That is what they will attempt to do. And folks, what we need to prepare for, those of us who understand we've broken with wokeness, we believe in genuine socialism, whatever they want to call us, they have different names for us. MAGA communism, PATSOC, anti-woke leftism, city building tendency, whatever you want to call us. The Rage Against the War Machine people, whatever you want to call us, genuine anti-imperialists, anti-woke left, whatever you want to call us. We have to figure out how the coming wave against wokeism doesn't destroy us. Let the woke ship sink. Let the woke ship go down. But make sure we don't go down with that ship. We must make sure that when wokeism goes down, we do not go down with it. We have got to plant the seeds and establish the relationships so that we don't go down with wokeness. Because the imperialists will do everything they can to try and identify us with wokeism as the population turns against it and as the anger of the population against wokeism intensifies. They're going to do everything they can to try and identify us with wokeness. And we have to position ourselves so that the wave of anti-wokeness and the sinking of wokeism doesn't destroy us. That's a tough pill to swallow. It's a tough pill to swallow, but we need to survive the coming explosion against wokeism. And we need to find our place within it. So that as people are rising against wokeism, some of them come into our camp. Some of them come into our wing of things. And just like the wokes are so hostile to us now, I expect that in the circumstances where anti-wokeness gains the upper hand, the anti-woke people are going to be just as hostile to us. They're going to call us Chinese agents. They're going to call us traitors. They're going to call us Marxists. Just like the wokes call us fascists. The wokes call us neo-Nazis and white supremacists. The anti-wokes are going to call us dirty commie traitors. The anti-wokes are going to call us sellouts to China. They're going to call us queer degenerates. They're going to call us all kinds of stuff. We have to figure out how we can position ourselves within the coming anti-woke wave so that it doesn't destroy us. We don't abandon our principles. And to some degree or other, that some of the people who awaken in the process of opposing wokeism come into our side. And it's a very difficult thing to do. I don't expect this to happen overnight. But if you look at the way the wind is blowing, you look at the way public opinion is shifting, you look at the way economic circumstances are deteriorating, this is what's coming next. This is what's coming next. There will be a blowback against wokeism. And we need to position ourselves so the blowback against wokeism does not destroy us. We're against wokeism for very different reasons. We're against wokeism because we recognize that it is a straying away from class struggle. We're against wokeism because we realize that degrowth and driving down of living standards is what the imperialists are trying to do. It's not what the working class is trying to do. We are against wokeism because we're opposed to wars, and wars are being sold with progressive and leftist sounding language. We're against wokeism because we love the American people, and we don't believe that they are the enemy. They're all a bunch of bad, privileged people who need to be shamed. We're against wokeism because we don't think Kamala Harris, the queen of mass incarceration, being vice president of the United States, is a huge victory for women and people of color. That's why we're against wokeism. We're not against wokeism because we think gay people are bad and need to be shamed and bullied and humiliated. There may be some among us who have a religious objection to homosexuality, but that's on the side. We're not against wokeness because we think racism isn't real. We acknowledge that racism is absolutely real. And the oppression of black people, the struggle of black people as a colonized people within U.S. borders, the police brutality that black people face, the discrimination and hiring, the historic injustice, we acknowledge that. We're not against wokeism because we think wokeism is a big conspiracy from China. We're against wokeism because we think wokeism is a conspiracy from the CIA. We're not against wokeism because we think wokeism is communism. We're against wokeism because we know it was invented to move people away from genuine communism into a middle class atomization, psychological derangement. Our anti-wokeness is fundamentally different from the prevailing anti-wokeness that's out there. It's just a fact. What we believe is anti-woke, but it's anti-woke for different reasons. And we have to position ourselves that when the prevailing anti-woke trend, the Ron DeSantis politics, gets the upper hand, it doesn't sink us. And how can we get people that are against wokeism to be against it in our way and not Ron DeSantis' way? How can we get people to be against wokeism and not blame China for wokeism? How can we get people to be against wokeism and more anti-war and more anti-imperialist and more in favor of genuine, real socialism? How can we embed ourselves in the wave of anti-wokeism and not get pushed out of it and not become the target of it? How can we do this? Right? This is going to require strategic thinking. This is going to require a level of professionalism and sophisticated operation that is rarely seen on the U.S. left. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be very, very, very difficult to do it. But we have to do it. We have to survive the anti-woke turning of the tide that's coming, just as we've survived the woke tide. Many of you found me because I debated Vosh. Many of you found me because I got targeted by BreadTube, and we, as much as they were nasty and awful and hateful to us, we managed to siphon the well-intentioned people off of the woke BreadTube current and into our affairs. We wrote the BreadTube book. Right? We managed within the chaos of woke BreadTube and the pandemic to piece together the Center for Political Innovation. That's what we managed to do. We managed to build our anti-imperialist current, even though the BreadTubers and the wokes came at us like crazy. We managed to utilize the interest in communism and socialism that was generated by wokeness. We managed to use that for our own ends. That's something we can be proud of. We did what we could do. We would have liked it to have been more. We would have liked these people not to have been our enemies, but they made it clear they were going to be our enemies. And despite them being our enemies, we accomplished a lot. We built this community up from nothing. We got to the point we could have big conferences, in real life organizing. We met the best of the best. So because of that, I think we can do the same amid the wave of anti-wokeness. I think we can do the same thing. But we have to start thinking about it now. We have to position ourselves. We have to prepare for it because it won't be easy. And right now, some of the anti-woke circles are friendly to us, but as they make China the main enemy, as they get the upper hand, they won't be as friendly to us. So this is something I want you all to think about, and I want to thank the friend who got me thinking this way. I get mad at Midwest Marx. I get mad at leftists in general, but if you've attached yourself to wokeism, you're a sinking ship. All these people who attach themselves to wokeism are getting flushed down the toilet pretty soon. The ruling class is going to realize they've gotten all they can out of wokeism. And they're going to realize that wokeism is not where the energy is at, and they're going to shift. They're going to shift their alliances. They're going to shift their politics. We need to figure out how we will survive this. So that's what I wanted to communicate to all of you tonight. I hope that those were insightful opening remarks. Give you a lot to think about. How do we prepare for the inevitable blowback against wokeism? And how do we prepare to not be destroyed by it? So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and I'm going to start calling you out as I see you, names and locations. And I cannot show you on the screen like I normally do because StreamYard, is backed up. It's not showing the chat. So I'm just going to read you off as I see you in the chat. Jonathan Mahari in Sweden, Temple City, California. Do you foresee civil unrest if Trump is prevented from running? All right. Put it down. JT24 in Pittsburgh. Hi, Caleb. Isaac Kabara from Vancouver. Christina in Portland. Alex Rickel in Oregon. Clinton Fraser in London. Alex from Brazil. Chester in England. Colin in Greensboro. Heidi in Edinburgh, Scotland. Springfield, Massachusetts. Samuel, GSI. Jamie in St. Paul, Minnesota. Jacob in Monroe, Louisiana. Lisa Smith. Ryan in Kansas City, Gleb in Long Beach, Lisa in Pennsylvania, Caleb Havroth from Ypsilanti, St. David's, Bermuda, Detroit. Carolyn and Dario from Brooklyn. Shout out to you. Grady in Southern California. Gabby Hernandez in Chicago. Hope you guys are enjoying the summer. Soviet Commissar in San Diego County. Seneca, South Carolina. Micah in Las Vegas. Mariah in North Carolina says happy Tuesday. Sarah in Toronto. Work in progress in Ottawa. Welcome, 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 everybody. Abel Malcolm from Milwaukee. John McCarthy in Chicago. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you all here. Phil DeBreeze in Mesopotamia. Carolyn and Dario from Brooklyn, Orange County. Los Angeles, Nico P. Welcome, 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 everybody. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notifications bell. Always a pleasure to be here with all of you. Always a pleasure to be here with all of you. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button and hit the notifications bell. If you have more super chats, be sure to send them my way. Like I said, I'll be on the road starting tomorrow. We may try to do a stream from the road. We'll see how that works. It may be possible. It may not be. Karen Mendes in Germany, Proletarian Power in West Virginia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, join the Center for Political Innovation. We can always use new members. Every man a king, share our wealth. Writing it down. Yeah, I don't know why StreamYard is acting weird tonight. I like to show chats on the screen, but it doesn't seem to be letting me do that for some reason. So tonight we're just going to have to not show them on the screen, but I'm writing them all down. So yeah, so the first super chat I have is, do you know that Happy Days was set in American socialism? Milwaukee had a socialist mayor in the 1950s. Do you think this was intentional? Well, the Socialist Party of America did control the mayorship of Milwaukee for a long time. But you have to remember, this is long after the days of Eugene Debs. This is after the Socialist Party kicked out anyone who liked the Soviet Union. This is the party of Norman Thomas. And, they did run the leadership of Milwaukee, and they were not revolutionary at that time. This was a party that the majority of which supported the Vietnam War in the 50s and 60s. They were a party that believed in the welfare state. They talked about the State Department socialists. Michael Harrington was their main ideologue. Max Shachtman and the Shachtmanites eventually joined the Socialist Party. You talk about Norman Thomas, Michael Harrington, and the Socialist Party of the 1950s and the 1960s was a group of people. They absorbed a lot of Trotskyites and ex-Trotskyites, but they were a group of people that believed in the welfare state, really loathed communism, and believed in socialism in the sense that they believed in the Roosevelt's economic reforms. They talk about the State Department socialists. And then Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Minnesota had been a stronghold of the farmer populist movement. I believe it's still in Wisconsin. It's still not the Democratic Party. It's the DFL, the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. And that, the legacy of Robert La Follette and a lot of the Wisconsin progressives, they were left, I guess you could say. They were populists. They believed in economic justice, but they were anti-communist. And that Milwaukee, being a city in that part of the country, you had the Socialist Party, and they controlled the mayorship, the city government of that city in the 50s and 60s. That's true. But there was nothing revolutionary about it. Maybe they supported the civil rights movement. They were more sympathetic to labor unions, but these were Cold War liberals. This was a weird deviation of the Democrats. You have to remember, neoliberalism has taken a lot of steam in the last few years, right? In the last 10, 20, 30 years, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, labor unions in this country have been very significantly weakened. Labor unions have been very, very significantly weakened, and the welfare state has been really whittled down, right? Food stamps have been cut, and, but in the 50s and the 60s, labor unions were very, very strong, and labor unions and the Democratic Party believed in the welfare state. Lyndon Johnson ran for president. He was going to declare war on poverty. That was his platform that he ran for president on and won. 1964, Lyndon Johnson won the election saying he would, I will declare war on poverty. Lyndon Johnson was, he was pro-war. He was notoriously racist. His nickname had been Lynching Baines Johnson, but he ran for president. He was gonna get rid of poverty. He did photo ops with low-income African-American children who he arranged to get some free food. And, it was almost like Queen Victoria, or the Queen of England, like patting African children on the head. But, that was the Democratic Party at one time. They liked unions. And they liked social programs. Someone in the chat, LBJ passed Medicare and Fair Housing Act. And the Socialist Party was a wing of the Democratic Party, especially post-World War II. The Socialist Party, Norman Thomas, they were I don't know what you want to call it. They were the wing of the Democratic Party that emphasized the social welfare state, emphasized that unions are good, and was really anti-communist and thought that communists were rotten. And a lot of them supported the Bay of Pigs invasion. A lot of them supported the Vietnam War. And ultimately, the Socialist Party collapsed in the early 70s. And it split three ways. The one faction was led by pacifists. And that faction that was led by pacifists, they are now called the Socialist Party USA. And that's it was led by, I can't remember his name, the guy who started the War Resisters League. I cannot remember his name. His name escapes me. The guy who started the War Resisters League. Thank you, Alex, for your super chat. I am cutting and pasting it. The guy who started the War Resisters League, I can't remember his name. That guy, and he started the Socialist Party USA in the early 70s because he was a pacifist. He was opposed to all war. Then you had Michael Harrington, and he started the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee. And the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee, those were people that were kind of against the Vietnam War, but not really, right? They came to the conclusion that the Vietnam War was bad policy, but they thought it was well-intentioned. They thought it was a good thing to protect South Vietnam from communism, but it wasn't working out. They turned against it gradually, right? That was Michael Harrington, and those are the folks that started the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee, what's now DSA. Irving Howe and Michael Harrington. And then there was another faction, which still exists, as it was called, that became the Social Democrats USA. They actually supported the Vietnam War till the end. And they supported Ronald Reagan in the 80s. They were socialists who were so anti-communist and so pro-Israel that they took another position. But the Socialist Party that controlled Milwaukee, that had the mayorship in Milwaukee in the 50s and 60s, that was not a Marxist organization in any conceivable way. Those were Democrats who symbolically ran under another party's name and who believed in the welfare state and believed in labor unions. And, I've heard some wild things. I mean, I understand there was a widespread tolerance for racism in the Socialist Party in those days. That this mayor of Milwaukee would tell very racist jokes about African Americans. And, it was, but the reason that you had that in the 1950s and 60s was because Roosevelt had been president for so long, and that labor unions being a good thing was deeply embedded in the American consciousness. And the welfare state was not universally hated. There were many people who remembered starving as children in the 1930s and the Great Depression, and remembered, what the Great Depression was like. And so you didn't have this notion that the welfare state was inherently bad, and that one could vote for Lyndon Johnson and be kind of where Bernie Sanders is at in terms of politics. One could vote for Lyndon Johnson, and you had this layer of people they called the State Department socialists that worked at the U.S. State Department, believed in socialism, but they also repeated standard U.S. foreign policy. And they were a big part of American politics coming out of McCarthyism. Once McCarthyism was broken, late 50s to the early 70s, you had these kind of people, right? And the Socialist Party was one wing of this, and it was technically part of the Democratic Party, but it was, right? It was part of the Democratic Party apparatus. These people would get jobs. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Michael Harrington had a job in the Lyndon Johnson administration. His book, The Other America, which was about the problem of poverty, it highlighted the poverty of urban African Americans, of Appalachians and others. That these folks, Michael Harrington, and these kind of social democrats, you could call them. They're really social democrats. Social democracy was much more widely tolerated among Democrats back in the 50s and 60s. It was with the 1970s, you saw the rise of neoliberal economics. And it wasn't really until Bernie Sanders and his big explosion in 2016 that kind of politics has even been allowed among Democrats anymore. Democrats, were not allowed to speak that way. Bill Clinton really cracked down on this kind of thing with his DLC that he formed in the 1980s, the Democratic Leadership Council that was to go after far left. But Jimmy Carter declared war on these kind of people also, right? And especially the labor unions, the smokestack Democrats, the Democrats who were tied in with the Teamsters and others. They were crushed by the Democratic Party. The New Left was a way of breaking these kinds of politics. And it's weird because these folks were pro-war, and these folks were, they were not communists in any conceivable way, but the agenda of austerity was what the ruling class was pushing. And it was the Carter administration that signified the Democratic Party's full transition away from this. Jimmy Carter did not sound like Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson had been pro-war and done the Vietnam War and had been a racist, but he believed in the welfare state and he believed in labor unions. Jimmy Carter did not. Jimmy Carter believed in the very beginnings of wokism. He believed in degrowth. He believed in identity politics, the first president ever to meet with gay rights activists at the White House. He convened the National Women's Conference in Texas and had a conference to discuss women's rights and women's issues. Jimmy Carter was the beginning of the new left taking over the left wing of American politics. And then part of what he did was abscam, where he targeted, with the FBI, they did these frame up sting operations against people in his own party who were too much into the welfare state and too much into labor unions and didn't believe in degrowth. The Socialist Party of America, after it had long repudiated the Bolsheviks, after it had long repudiated Eugene Debs, after it had become a party that was on U.S. imperialism's side during the Cold War, but still believed in, that maybe we ought to have national health care eventually, and, the welfare state is good and unions are good. They had a place in the Democratic coalition. And actually the civil rights movement, I believe the Montgomery bus boycott, the early years of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. involved these folks. The United Auto Workers Union bankrolled a lot of Martin Luther King Jr.'s activism and paid for it. Norman Thomas was involved in it. And these kind of folks, the Socialist Party of America kind of people, they were involved in the early years of the civil rights movement. And a lot of these people eventually turned against the 1960s political upsurge. There's a guy, and he died, Todd Gitlin. If you read Todd Gitlin, is a writer, a big academic who's in the DSA circles. Todd Gitlin talked about, good 60s versus bad 60s. I think he wrote a book called Years of Hope and Days of Rage. It was like his history of the 1960s. Todd Gitlin, and he starts about the 60s started good, but then, the civil rights movement was good. Students for a Democratic Society was good, but then it turned into Maoism. It turned into the Black Panthers. It turned into communism, and that's bad, right? Todd Gitlin was one of these folks, right? And he was one of these folks that tried to, he wanted the Democratic Party to be the party of Lyndon Johnson, right? And he got a lot of play at Occupy Wall Street. I remember they really played him up. Cecily McMillan, the political prisoner of Occupy Wall Street, was very close to Todd Gitlin, and he kind of mentored her, if I'm not mistaken. And that this was, the Socialist Party of America, that split into the Socialist Party USA, DSA, and the Social Democrats USA. That they were not communist in any conceivable way. I think you meant well asking the question, Jeebus. I'm not trying to bash you, but it's like, if you want to, it kind of made sense, right? That in the 50s, Happy Days is set in the 1950s, right? And that that was part of 50s America, right? Social democracy, the welfare state, was largely not popular, but in liberal strongholds, very liberal historic cities like Milwaukee, it was allowed to exist. It's a long answer. And I'm trying not to poo-poo that, right? We do want to celebrate that. We should acknowledge that the Democrats have really repudiated what they once were. They were an anti-austerity party. They were an economic populist party at one time. They did believe in a welfare state. So I'm not trying to poo-poo this. I'm just trying to explain to you how that was and why it existed. Next question. What is your knowledge of the Stonewall riots? Sure. 1969, New York City. At that time, it was illegal to be a homosexual in most of the United States. Homosexuality was a crime. It was, it was sodomy or whatever. New York City was known to be a place that gay people would go to. New York City and San Francisco were two really well-known places that gay people would go. And there were a lot of gay bars in New York City. A lot of bars that everyone knew. If you were gay or you were looking for gay stuff, you went there. One of those bars was called the Stonewall Inn, and it was in Greenwich Village, right? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was a hotel there also, but it was, it was a bar and gay people would go there to drink alcohol. The NYPD was largely quite conservative. It's a lot of Irish Roman Catholics. They didn't like gay people. And it's kind of a macho thing. Gay men are considered to be effeminate, right? The police are big, strong police who arrest people and beat people up. And so the NYPD had a routine. Here's right. We got a question about global warming. Just cutting and pasting it. The NYPD would raid these bars, and they would go in and they would arrest people in some cases for cross-dressing, which was a crime, right? It was like if you did not have at least 3 items of gender-appropriate clothing on, that was like considered public indecency. They would arrest people for cross-dressing. They would, harass the bars around their licenses. And that the NYPD, they didn't much care for gay people, and they wanted to go beat up some gay people. It was like a bullying kind of thing. The NYPD were these kind of conservative, big, strong, macho guys who wanted to beat up on some gay people, right? And it was awful. I mean, it was an awful thing that happened. 1969, though, you have to remember, that's, New York City at that point was a little bit of a strange place, right? There was frequently, hippies and counterculture young people from all over America congregated in New York City. There was a group called the Motherfuckers, right? And they were a group of anarchists, and they would have rallies, and they would chant, "Smoke dope, get high, all the pigs are gonna die. Smoke dope, get high, all the pigs are gonna die." And they would just go out and get into fistfights with the police. And there were a lot of drug-using young people who were hippies and counterculture who would come to New York City and get in scuffles with the police. That happened. There was just, there was a building in Greenwich Village that said was called, it said LSD, and it was a church. It was legally designated as a church. It was the League of Spiritual Discovery, LSD. And it was run by Dr. Timothy Leary, and you could go in there and get free acid 24 hours a day. It was open, and anyone could just walk in and get LSD, get hallucinogens. And New York City, there were just thousands and thousands and thousands of young hippies and young, young, long-haired, hippie, drug-using people that would congregate, right? And there was frequently rioting and protests against the police, and a lot of this was not communist. A lot of this was very, this were, the Hare Krishnas were there, and the I don't know what else, the hippies, the counterculture, people using drugs, people selling drugs, people, there was just a lot of teenage runaways and all kinds of people. And it was just, the USA had a very strong economy back in these days. You have to remember, right? There was a lot more wealth in the United States, but, information technology was not what it was, right? If you wanted to learn about different ideas, you wanted to read about communism or Eastern mysticism or homosexuality or things that were considered taboo by most of America, you couldn't just Google it, right? So people that were interested in more alternative kinds of things, people who wanted to use drugs, people who wanted to be hippies, people who liked rock and roll music, there was a lot of counterculture folks convening in Greenwich Village, etc. And these folks would fight the police. They thought the police were their enemies. The police tended to be, more conservative, Irish Catholics, short-haired. They arrested people for using drugs, etc. So it was, that this was the atmosphere, right? I've read a lot of histories of this. The book, The Prophet's Children, which is by Tim Woolforth. Tim Woolforth, was the leader of the Workers' League, which was like a Trotskyite group that existed in New York City during these years. He recruited a lot of these people. It was just an atmosphere where there was just a lot of, the economy was good, but there was a lot of like confused people. There was a culture war going on. So in this atmosphere, these gay bars would frequently get raided. And Stonewall, I guess, the woman who sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," Judy Garland, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, she was kind of a gay icon, Judy Garland, right? She was this female singer who would, she would sing. She sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." June, yeah, I just Googled it. June 1969, she died. And her concerts were a place gay men would gather. She was like a gay icon, and she died. So many people were mourning the death of Judy Garland. "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" has become kind of a gay anthem, So she had just died. A lot of the gay people in Greenwich Village, that idealized her, were very sad that Judy Garland had died. And so in that atmosphere, the Stonewall Inn, the NYPD raided it. And for whatever reason, that night, the gay people fought back. And, Greenwich Village, which was known to be a gay stronghold, there was an explosion of LGBT activism, I guess you could call it. There was just people went and fought the police, and drag queens fought the police, and gay men fought the police, and people broke windows and spray painted the phrase "gay power." And that was kind of the beginning of the modern gay rights movement. And it was basically in response to the fact that the NYPD was routinely bullying and harassing gay people, and there was kind of an uprising against it. There was an uprising against it, and that was the Stonewall Rebellion. It kind of gave birth to the modern LGBT rights movement. They made Stonewall a landmark in New York. And look, the rebellion was justified. These NYPD were harassing gay people and brutalizing them and terrorizing them, preventing them from, having a good time at a bar, being with other gay people. And so there was a rebellion. I mean, I don't think, there's a little bit too much anti-gay sentiment in the woke folk community. I'll say that. There's a little bit, or in the anti-woke spheres, in our wing of the internet, I will say that, right? It's one thing if you have a religious objection to homosexuality, but, don't defend bullying. Don't defend bullying. Don't defend discrimination. Don't defend, the awful things. I mean, the gay community, they were fighting back against real bullying, real discrimination, real persecution, right? And that's wrong. I mean, it's wrong to mistreat people, I mean, your religion is your business, but, people shouldn't be beaten up for being gay. People shouldn't be, have their bars raided. And, it was awful what they were going through, that the gay community at that point was facing. And so they rebelled, they fought back. And that was the atmosphere of the times, right? 1969, Greenwich Village in New York City, people were fighting the police. That was the hip, cool thing to do. There were a lot of different counterculture groupings, and it was the energy in U.S. society at that point. The energy in that particular spot, that particular time was, it's cool and hip to fight the police. It's cool and hip to, to break windows and riot and stuff. And so the gay community saw they were being mistreated, and they did it. And I mean, I think they were justified. I think they were justified in what they did. Under those circumstances. And, as much as we can talk about how we might have questions about the trans thing or whatever, I mean, there's no question that what happened at Stonewall, I mean, there you go. Next question. RFK just brought the truth about Ukraine to 100 times more Americans than bitter Twitter. Yeah, I am going to have to watch RFK's speech. Sounds like it was pretty important. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that RFK, I know he said some confusing different things on Ukraine. So, I'm glad to hear that. I'm very, very glad to hear that he did that. And, we need to be going to RFK meetups and meeting people. Someone said, land back is genocide. What happens to non-native people? Well, look, let's just be clear that, no one will ever define what land back actually means. Okay? Sometimes land back is the name of it means for the privatization of government land sponsored by George Soros. Sometimes land back means that every white person must leave North America. And sometimes land back means sovereignty for indigenous people and reparations for what they've been through. Right? I don't support privatization of government land sponsored by George Soros. I do support the sovereignty of indigenous people, their right to self-determination, and reparations for what they've been through. And I don't support all white people leaving North America. The problem with land back is that the goalpost constantly changes. You're never allowed to ask any questions. You just have to support it no matter what it is. And if you don't, you're racist. But the definition changes. It's a lot like open borders now. It's a lot like abolish the police. It's a bunch of emotional leftist nonsense that is not serious policy. Now, if you want to talk about serious policy, should indigenous groups have the right to declare independence from the American government? Absolutely. Should indigenous groups, they want to break away and have their own territory, have the right to do so? Absolutely. Should every white person in America be forced to leave? No. Should we privatize government land sponsored by George Soros? No. But let's talk about what you're really for. But they don't want to talk about that. You're against land back. And it's like, I mean, abolish the police. To most people, that sounds deranged. Now, if you actually talk to abolish the police folks, what they mean is we should replace the police with some kind of popular, progressive, working class thing. Well, I agree with that. But that's not going to happen until we've overthrown capitalism. That's not going to happen until we have a new society. So it's kind of a moot point, right? Abolish prisons, abolish the police, land back. All of these things are these things that just sound so amazingly woke and revolutionary. And to most people that aren't part of the cult, it just sounds nuts. It sounds bonkers. And these people are such assholes. You can't say to them, what does that actually mean? Open borders now. Even if we were a socialist government, there would still be a border. People would have to show a passport before they entered the country. But open borders now? That's not a serious policy. What? You're against it? You're racist. No. I'm for legalizing the undocumented workers. I'm for full legalization of the undocumented. I'm against discrimination against immigrant communities. I think that all the things the Trumpers want to do to immigrant communities will make all the problems of mass migration worse. But open borders now is not a real policy. And this cringe liberalism where people just shout, land back, open borders, abolish the police, and they can't explain any of it. It's infuriating. Take this seriously, please. Take this seriously, please. That is my request. Please take this seriously. Next question. All right. Can you talk about the Battle of Blair Mountain? Yes, that was an uprising of coal miners shortly after World War I, if I'm not mistaken. In West Virginia, coal miners were on strike, and they fought against the company thugs. The military was sent in, and among many of the coal miners, they had fought in World War I, and they didn't feel like they were ready to fight the U.S. military, and so that's when it ended. But it was a coal miners uprising that happened in West Virginia, and I think 1919, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 1920. So there you go. What was the very first Communist Party ever formed, and what were the circumstances surrounding it? Well, that's a good question, right? What counts as a Communist Party, right? I mean, the Communist Manifesto was written in 1848 as the manifesto for Karl Marx's faction in the German Revolution, right? There was an uprising, demanding the creation of a German nation state, and Karl Marx's group was the Communist League or the Communist Party, depending on the translation. He wrote the Communist Manifesto, but there had been many other groups that advocated socialism before that. There was the League of the Just, which I think is funny. It's the Justice League. But coming out of the French Revolution, there had been a group called the League of the Just. There'd been the Conspiracy of Equals, which I think is a funny name. The Conspiracy of Equals. There were a number of these different socialist groupings that had formed. As capitalism was emerging, many people were realizing something was wrong with capitalism. That they wanted a more equitable society. Henry Saint-Simon, Robert Owen, these people emerged, and there were many different organizations. The first working class movement in the history of the world was the Chartist movement, and it was in Britain. And it had a charter that they called for, that was to have a 12-hour workday and protections for workers on the job. And when was the Chartist movement? That was the first working class movement in history. Was the Chartists, the Chartist movement. It's the first proletarian movement, Chartism, and it started in the 1830s. So that was the first working class movement, but they weren't fully socialist, right? They didn't call for full socialism, but they were the first mass working class movement, Chartism. So there you go. Do you foresee civil unrest if Trump is prevented from running? Maybe. I mean, I think if Trump is prevented from running, a lot of people that are alienated from U.S. society will not turn to elections, right? They will turn to other means. Now, whether that means there'll be civil disobedience, protests, that'll discourage people. There'll be a lot. Elections are a way that the U.S. public is controlled, right? Elections are considered the outlet. Elections are the time it's okay to think about politics. If you think about politics any other time, but at the elections, you're a nerd. You're a big nerd, right? I'm being sarcastic, of course, but that's kind of the attitude, right? That politics, it happens every 4 years. That's when everyone has to have an opinion about whether they like this politician or they like that one. And if it gets to the point that the candidate who would have a majority, if the election was happened today, if he was not allowed to run, I think that would lead to politics leaving the standard outlets, which in a way could be a good thing. But I mean, a lot of those people that would leave it would be right wing. It would be a confusing situation. It would be very demoralizing for the country. I feel like Obama got elected. The ruling class very much felt like the people who were angry at Bush, the black community, but also, Europe and people tied to Europe and people who felt, they needed to be heard. And then Trump got elected. And Trump was a lot of the conservative folks who felt alienated. They needed to be heard, right? And that in a lot of ways, they staged little mini revolutions. They staged little mini electoral upsurges as a way of trying to control the unrest among the population. De Tocqueville, right? Alec de Tocqueville, the Frenchman who came to the United States, he said there could never be a revolution in the United States because there'll always be an election. Well, there was a revolution in the United States. The Civil War, That was a revolution. It couldn't be resolved within the elections. Divisions in the ruling class opened the doors. And, there are times that the elections don't tend to resolve these things, right? When the divisions in the ruling class become intense, you have Bonapartist struggles, you have, there are times when, things in the ruling class become much more divisive, when the working class is in motion, that's not the case. But Alec de Tocqueville, he was still pointing to a reality, which is that U.S. society uses the elections as kind of a release valve. And if they don't let Trump run, they'll lose that ability. The Constitution, I think it says something like, in order to ensure domestic tranquility, like stability in society, they're creating the Constitution of the United States. And the elections are a place where people go to the polls, and they punch their ballot. And I think that if they make clear that the elections, certain people aren't allowed to run, they're opening the door to losing that ability. So there you go. Every man a king. Share our wealth. That's Huey Long, right? The populist from Louisiana. Every man a king, for you can be a millionaire. But if there's something belonging to others, there's enough for all people to share. In the sunny June and September too, or in the winter time or spring, there'll be peace without end, every neighbor a friend, and every man a king. So there you go. There you go. Huey Long, the leader of Louisiana, who was a progressive in many ways, rose to power fighting the Ku Klux Klan, did a lot to advance the conditions of black people. Huey Newton is named after him. The populist leader of Louisiana, the Share Our Wealth movement, Huey Long. The goal of communists in the U.S. be to take back the CPUSA. Look, no disrespect to anyone who's tried to do this, but I have said from the beginning that's pointless. There's no hope in doing that. You're not going to take over the Communist Party. This is the property of somebody, right? You can't, it's people have tried that for decade after decade after decade. And, I've been doing this for a long time, right? I know what I'm doing. And I wish people, look, there's a big difference between internet performance art and and in real life organizing, real organizations, having real demonstrations and real events. And it's a lot different. And I'm just telling you, many people for many years, I've always been hearing the Communist Party is about to get better. It's not going to. At this point, the Communist Party is kicking out anybody who sounds like they might even have an anti-imperialist bone in their body. I mean, anyone who even mentions my name or Haas's name gets kicked out of the Communist Party. You're not going to take over the Communist Party. The Communist Party is a lot of assets. It's certain people's property. They will not give it away, right? Just like you can't get your neighbor to sign over his house to you or his car to you, you're not going to get him to sign the Communist Party over to you. It's not going to happen. All right. And I've said that from the beginning. And, CPI, we allow dual membership. You can be in the Communist Party and be in CPI. We don't have a problem with it, right? You can be in PCUSA. You can be in any party. We don't have an issue with it. But you're not going to take over the Communist Party. The FBI took over the Communist Party a long time ago. And the FBI is not going to let you take it over, right? Certain people have the gig of running it. Look, the Communist Party, you can always tell who's really in it and who's not. Because the people that are really in the Communist Party are not communists. There's a group of people that run the Communist Party, and you talk to them, and they're Democrats. There are other people who join the Communist Party on the internet, and they think they're members of the Communist Party, but they're not really members. And if you join the Communist Party, you'll see that really quickly. There's a group of people that are really members, and they're Democrats. And then there's other people who join it thinking it's actually what it claims to be, and it ain't. I have a long podcast about the Communist Party with Peter Coffin. It went really, really well. But the CPUSA, you will never take it over. You're not going to be able to play Model UN or follow Robert's Rules of Order and trick your way into leading the Communist Party. It's not going to happen, right? And, I've always known that, and I've tried to be respectful and not burn bridges with people. But, no one ever bothered to ask anybody who's known these people for years, people just think they know everything, and well, okay. I take this seriously. I'm trying to get shit done. And there's a lot of other people who are just trying to put on an internet show. right? And I'm not just trying to put on an internet show. I'm trying to take this seriously and get some real shit done. You know, and so, you know, maybe the internet show isn't as good as somebody else's internet show, but I know what I'm doing, and I know you're never going to be able to take over the Communist Party. And, you know, I don't know. Anyway, next question. What do you think? Will 600 ppm CO2 lead to 3 degrees warming? Is this a good thing? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, right? I think global warming is a reality, but I don't think that the solution to it is degrowth. I don't think the solution to it is reducing the population. I think the solution is fusion energy. It's advancing to a higher fuel source, a higher energy source. That is my position. So, you know, I'm open to different people's ideas, but I'm not ready to say that I don't think climate change is real. I think we're seeing evidence of weather irregularities and such. I'm not ready to say that man-made climate change is a hoax. I'm just not ready to say that because I'm not a scientist, and I'm not convinced, you know, that you know, I mean, there are dissidents within the scientific community, but you know, if it was indeed, you know, if it is indeed real, which I think it's very likely that some kind of man-made climate change exists, the answer is obviously to get beyond fossil fuels to a higher energy source. It's not to reduce consumption or reduce the population. But the fact that that's the only option we're presented with stinks to me. I don't like that. All right. The last question. Are you familiar with ABBA? Do you like any of their songs? My wife and I, a few years ago, we went to go see Mamma Mia, the musical, the movie of it, not the Broadway play. Just saw the movie of it. Yeah, you know, I'll occasionally listen to them, you know, whatever. Not one of my favorite things, but I was on a plane going to Miami, and I realized on the plane that there were not many, like they didn't have that much music you could listen to on the thing on the airline. And, you know, they did have a few ABBA songs on the, you know, the music you could listen to Dancing Queen, you know, but yeah, I'm not a huge ABBA fan, not into disco music. Sometimes I am, but you know, in springtime, I like that. When it's first getting to be spring, I'll listen to I'm Your Boogeyman or some of that 70s disco music, but overall it's not really my thing. You know, I'm more of a folk music kind of guy. I like folk music. I do listen to classical music every day when I wake up in the morning. So yeah, I'm not an ABBA guy. All right, I'm gonna put on the closing music, and maybe my next stream will be from the road. If not, it'll be when I get back. So we shall see. All right. Surge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.